welcome to our podcast. We're trying to figure out what this is going to be about and why we should do it and why we're the people to do it. So first, let me introduce everybody at the table. We have Paul Fabrizio, who is a professor of political science. Yeah, I had to think about that.
You forget what I am.
We've
We've known each other for a long time.
Here
and you
at McMurray,
teach what?
Yeah, well, it's reading dead people's mails, what I teach. And then...
Sort of creepy.
Yeah, it is creepy. So,
Who are you?
I'm Don Frazier. I'm professor of history at McMurray University. Paul Fabrizio is professor of political science at McMurray University. Christopher Bartlett is our studio manager. And then we have Scott Cloudis on my left, who is the man about town in Abilene and really serves as engineer for this program. And so we're coming to this essentially being residents of a small liberal arts school in West Texas. And so it's an opportunity to kind of talk about, life from this vantage point. Paul's got some stuff to say about politics. Christopher's got all sorts of angles from a student's perspective. And then Scott's been here since he was a zygote, so he knows everything about Abilene and West Texas and has kind of an outsider's view of our rather rarefied atmosphere.
Can I interrupt for a second?
I wish you would.
A zygote?
That's what he said.
That's what he said.
Well,
I mean, we can't just let that just slide through. We got to make some comment on it.
Yes, you get.
Yeah. Do you remember those days? By any chance?
No.
He had gill slits in the
my mother
tail.
wouldn't let me come out to play then. So.
Okay.
He was 6-cell blastoma when he was first in Abilene. And so
You were cute then.
this is an opportunity to explore everything from students' views on the world to people that are supposed to be experts in their field.
You,
Me.
me.
And also the approach from the man on the street.
That's me.
That is you. You are absolutely the man on
The
the street.
zygote on the street.
Yeah, absolutely the man with the common touch. All right, so let's talk politics for starters, because you were talking about an article that you saw at the beginning of the semester.
Yes. And the article I thought was really interesting because what they're trying to do is compare the current time that we're in to some historic period. So as you try to get a handle on the second year of the Trump administration, which is just beginning that second year, what do you compare it to? Is this comparable to the 1920s, the 1930s? Is this comparable to pre-World War II, 1910, 1914? Is it comparable to 1870? Where would you put this? And the author's perspective, and unfortunately I don't remember his name and I apologize, so it's hard to cite the footnotes here. The author's perspective that if you look at things politically, this is a comparable time to before World War I.
That bodes ill.
And yet this past week, I was talking to an economist who said, actually, there's a lot of comparison to the 1920s before the Great Depression.
That's scary.
Both
I
of
thought
them
the
were
Democrats
scary.
were already in the Great Depression.
Well, they are after the recent budget deal.
And also the election of Trump.
Yeah. So what would you say is the right historic period to categorize the current day? And is there a comparable period? That's a challenge for our historian here.
Well, it's a challenge for everybody because the historians do a lot of looking back, but we can't really project forward.
True.
And so the problem with that question, from my perspective, is there's not enough data to know.
Oh, come on.
We'll only know,
come
5 or
on.
10 years from now.
Oh, historians love to say that. Not enough data.
It's not because you have to let the Earth spin on its axis a few times. But how does it strike you from a student's perspective, this world that you're about to inherit? Because you graduate in May.
Yes. It's pretty scary. If there's a time period that I could try to compare it with is from what I've read about the 60s. Growing up, let's just say I have family members that lived in the 60s, and I always thought about how divided the country was then and wondered what that would be like. And so now here we are, the country is divided, maybe more so than in the 60s.
Well,
So I'm getting to experience that for myself.
well, let me ask you, what do you think took place in the 1960s?
Yeah.
The Vietnam War and civil rights caused a lot of rioting, protests,
Okay.
massive protests.
So it's the rioting and protesting that you're reacting to.
Yeah.
It's the Women's March.
But was there rioting at it?
Oh, they were being ferocious. Spitting
With
and
those little
cussing.
hats they had?
With their hats. Yes, with the pussy hats. I just like saying pussy hat. Oh.
I can't handle that. Just kidding. Just
Well,
kidding.
they said it.
You got the dinger from the side audience over there on that.
Yeah, I
one.
did.
Yeah,
We got a
Yeah,
little bit
I was
of
wondering, is there's a beeper on this thing?
yeah,
Yeah.
that would have been.
Is this uncensored or?
Yeah.
Apparently it was censored from the studio.
Yeah.
Next time, just go beep.
Yeah. What is Scott
I
the
can pull
engineer
up
going to
the
do? Do you have a
censor
7-second
thing on my
timer
phone.
thing?
Uh-uh.
Scott the engineer's looking away. He's going,
I
I
have
don't
a
have anything.
7-second timer. We're at 6:06 right now.
Okay.
Thank you.
No, it's
6:09.
6:09.
You're
Okay.
talking about a 7-second delay.
Delay,
Yeah.
that's it. That's
Oh,
it.
okay.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's what you're looking at. Yeah,
in
so-
case somebody says something they're not supposed to say.
yeah,
So we can
that's-
use this podcast as a way to talk politics.
We could.
And we could talk a little bit of history, but I dodged it.
I know. You
We-
did.
And we got the student perspective. So what's Abilene like on this whole Trumpian era?
Well,
The folks that you go elk hunting with, what do they say?
Well, everybody that I associate with is pretty much on the Trump train, and so most of my friends are farmers, ranchers, that kind of stuff, based in agricultural oil and all that. So of course they're going to be on the Trump train because I don't think any of them were ever on the Obama train whatsoever. So that is,
Was that a train?
I don't know what this train
Might have been an undulating
Yeah.
column.
Well,
I'm not sure.
some people said it was a train wreck.
Wreck,
It has
yes.
to be a train to begin with.
right.
So, now, are they on with Trump in terms of his tweeting? Are they on with Trump in terms of his unguarded comments about certain countries in another continent?
I would think that most of them would probably say they're not in line with Trump's tweeting.
Okay.
That's kind of, the people that I hear talk about that say that, it gets him probably in more trouble than what he is. And Trump's got a mouth on him and he shoots straight forward. He tells you like it is.
Even if it's uninformed.
Even if it is uninformed.
So like Rush Limbaugh.
Well, okay, if you're going to draw that
Just
comparison, yeah.
No, you have to make it even. So you talked about a conservative, now talk about a liberal who shoots
Like
without
Rachel
being-
Maddow.
Okay, good. Now it's
Ooh.
even.
So there.
Divided but even. Continue.
Yeah. But there's a lot of people that I think like that he speaks his mind and tells it straightforward and tells hey snowflake, shut up and put on your big boy pants and go to work. That's how you make America great again.
So, how do they reconcile the tweeting with the telling it like it is?
Well, and I don't know if you can really ask that question. Now, it depends on what age demographic you're talking about.
Okay.
I myself just turned 50. I don't
A
tweet.
youngster.
Yeah.
Yes,
Beer child.
yes. I don't tweet. None of my friends tweet. Certainly, this older set that I'm talking about don't tweet. So I don't know if they really understand exactly what it is, except he's stuck his foot in his mouth again. So,
But
and that's-
isn't it weird that the president, who's 71,
yes.
has mastered this social media that most of us
Do you
don't
think
use?
he's really the author?
Yes. Oh, of course.
You think he's sitting there in his bedroom,
Yes.
He's got-
He is.
KFC bucket on the
yes.
bedside table?
Or-
He's
or-
typing all this
yes,
stuff in?
Yes, indeed.
And my feeling on that is he learned that way before he became president, because that's the way he's selling the Trump brand, and that's the way to keep the Trump brand in front of everybody.
Yeah, just
all
keep it
day,
royal.
all along. Yeah.
See, he's a
So-
genius with social marketing. I mean, that's really what it is. He sells himself.
Right. I
His
agree totally.
unvarnished self. He's so good at doing that.
Yes.
We should all be that good at selling ourselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I could be rich like Trump.
Yeah,
You
you
know.
could be.
It could be rich like it could be Cloudus Towers everywhere.
Yeah, exactly.
We'd be in Cloudus Studio,
It
right?
would be Cloudus Studio. Brought to you by the Cloudus Corp. Huh, that's interesting. So that's back to that history question.
Which history question?
Which
Yeah,
history question?
You know,
The one
what
that
era are we
began
in?
with?
Is it like
Yeah.
1920? Is it
Yeah.
like 1916 or whatever? Is it,
Yeah.
Is it like Thursday last? I don't know. I'm intrigued by Christopher's idea that we're in the midst of the 60s. I mean, what do you think the world is going to be like that you inherit?
Who knows? I can't even begin to predict what it would be like, because who knows if we're going to be at war with Korea.
Is that a real fear for you?
Yeah. Funny story. So,
Funny story.
All right.
one thing you'll learn about me is I'm great at segues. Even connecting two things that aren't related, I'm good at connecting them. I'll at least tell myself.
That's right. You're a great guy.
Yeah.
You're making Christopher great again.
Yeah, exactly. When was the false alarm in Hawaii? Was that a week ago?
A week ago Saturday.
Okay. Like the day after that happened, I had a terrible dream that we all got a text that a missile was incoming and it was all chaos and everything, and woke up and I was really scared about what would happen if that was reality. And
Maybe we're like the 1950s.
yeah, could be.
Because we're having civil defense nightmares.
Yeah. Did you grow up with duck and cover?
No.
Climb under your desk? So
No,
I'm the
no.
only one. You did?
No, they taught us that in school. Duck and cover.
But
That's
what-
going to protect you from a nuclear blast.
Well,
yeah.
that's what we were told.
My school desk is going to save my life.
Well,
Whatever.
that's what
Well,
we
my
were told.
dad actually had us build a cave underneath our house. Now, I was a little young to get in on it. And being the youngest of 10 kids, it was probably just a make-work project.
Probably.
Hey, kids, what are y'all doing today? I don't know. Thought we'd go break something or hurt each other. No, we're going to help dig the family cave because it was a bomb shelter in Big Spring, Texas.
Okay.
So,
How many rattlesnakes moved into that?
well, I tell you, it was a lot of fun playing guns when you had your own cave underneath
Oh,
the
I
house.
bet.
Because you could get in there, and if somebody's trying to, shoot their way in and get you out, you'd always get them first. Till my older siblings figured out that if you put a bunch of tumbleweeds at the mouth of the cave and set them on fire, the people in the cave will come out.
What a surprise.
Yeah, by the time the oxygen runs out, oh, I give up, you win.
That's kind of like that movie Hacksaw Ridge. Wasn't
Yeah,
it?
I like that. Yeah, we were pioneers in how to.
You had
use
an
each other.
interesting upbringing, didn't
Yeah,
you,
I
out
was.
there in West Texas?
In the wild.
I was in Southern California. It was a little different there.
No caves there.
No caves. A lot of beach.
A lot of that's
Yeah.
pretty pleasant.
And, of course, a lot of defense industries there, too.
yeah,
so
that's true.
we
So that was
always
kind of
assumed
top of
we
the
were,
mind awareness.
Yeah, we assumed we were targets.
Well,
So-
didn't they had a rocket launch out there from Vandenberg?
They did.
About a month ago that freaked everybody in L.A. out.
Yeah, because they hadn't seen one in a long time. And it looked gorgeous. My brother, who lives out there, he called me up and said, "You should see what's going on." And then he put it on Facebook. He was like, "Wow, that's gorgeous."
That's
So,
pretty cool. Wasn't that
it was SpaceX or something.
was it
like
space?
that?
It was a
Something.
SpaceX launch. Yeah.
So, anyway, going back to duck and cover, is that all right?
Yeah,
we do
it's
that
fine
for a
by
second?
me. Yeah, it's your
So
show.
you didn't have it; you just heard about it, right, Scott?
Oh, no. They taught us duck and
They
cover
taught you
in
that
elementary
here in
school.
Abilene.
Yes, they did.
50 years ago, because Dyess Air Force Base had nuclear weapons.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they were, we're B-1 base now, but we were B-52 base then.
Mm-hmm.
And C-130. But they stored, I don't know if we still store nuclear weapons out there or not, but at one time
We're
they
not.
did store nuclear
We're not
warheads.
supposed to be storing them out there per treaty with Russia.
Okay.
Really, where are we supposed to store them?
Someplace else, Louisiana,
Huh.
North Dakota.
Okay.
Really?
Yeah.
Why
I did
those
not know.
places and not Abilene?
That was a treaty that was signed. They wanted to concentrate where you store the weapons instead of having them scattered all over the place. So that way the Russians could know what's there and what's not there. And so,
Right.
So it's okay. The Russians still come to Dyess Air Force Base here and do inspections.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's all set up and we
Huh.
know it. So there's not supposed to be any nukes at Dyess Air Force Base. At least that's the public word.
Right.
So
Yeah.
Okay, then I'll publicly say there's no nukes at Dyess Air Force Base anymore.
Okay, but there are B-1 bombers,
There are B-1 bombers.
which apparently in 20 minutes can be fixed so that they can carry nukes.
Yeah,
Yes.
out of a rotary launcher. I've seen that.
Yeah.
Now, what's
Be
the
on their
base?
way.
Yeah, what's the base in the Indian Ocean?
Diego Garcia.
Yeah, that's where we have a big stockpile, don't we?
I assume so.
Yeah, one would.
And Guam, I
Yeah.
assume. So. And
So the
Louisiana is the closest one where the B-52s are stored.
So the chances of him getting nuked in Abilene have just gone way down.
Good.
Yeah, that's what you would think, except the B-1s are here.
Yeah, the weapon system is, but not the weapons.
Right. So if you're taking out some of the weapons, do you want to take out the weapon system as well? So I would assume it'd be on the list, but farther down.
But they're not
So
going
you're safe.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I would figure it's being safe because even though if they did push the button and it was coming to dice, they're not going to do anything except blow dice up because they're going to scramble all those planes that are out there and they're out of here. So,
Okay, can Dias scramble its planes within the 30 minutes or so?
yes.
They can,
You think
except
so?
for, are they working? Are they ready to go? Are the pilots ready to go?
Well,
And, I've talked to some of the pilots,
yeah.
and they say things like, well, about a third of our planes aren't working right now, or half our planes aren't working.
Oh, well, that's, yeah.
And so, we'll be able to get some, I assume, off the
Sure.
runway, but we'll be able to get enough.
I
Because-
wonder what the readiness rate is on B-1s.
I live over in, the Brook Hollow area edition off of 27th there, and you can hear all night long them. They turn the engines on, they turn the engines off, they turn the engines on, and you can hear that going on. And that we always just thought that was them keeping those planes ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
I may be dead wrong on that, but you evidently have talked to a pilot, and he would know way more than me about that.
Yeah, but what would he tell? Would he tell the truth?
That's
I don't know.
true. Yeah,
See,
that's true.
I mean,
Yeah.
you hear stories, and what is the deeper truth? And I'm not sure we're privileged to know that information.
You're
So-
probably right.
So, where does this all leave us? I don't know.
I don't know.
Well,
That
it
could
leaves
be-
him less nightmarish.
Yeah.
I had a nightmare that I was killing a lot of wasps in a air conditioning system. I have no idea.
That
why
is
I
a
had-
true nightmare.
That is a
That
true nightmare. I was just covered up with wasps. So I have absolutely no idea why I had that.
Ladies and gentlemen, listen into our podcast as we talk about wasps.
yeah, I'm talking about
On the
my freaky
professors.
freaky dream.
Okay. So
that
we're
is
taking.
freaky.
Well, the interesting thing about the concept of this podcast is that being at a university puts you in a particular strange vantage point. Now, most universities have got massive research attached to them, maybe huge, school of 50,000 students. But we're at a small school.
We are.
1,200 students in a fairly isolated place, relatively speaking, Abilene, Texas. And our students are an interesting bunch of kids from, by and large, smaller towns. I mean, I hate to be too stereotypical, but yeah, these represent small town Texas, New Mexico, more than anything else. But, ultimately, this is an intellectual learning community. And so there's a million stories to tell on a small liberal arts campus, both from the students and their stories to the folks that help make the university and this sort of enterprise run, and then the colossal brains that inhabit such places.
Who's he talking
I don't
about?
know.
I don't know.
You? I don't
Big
know.
80-pound
I don't
brain.
think so.
So I'm just saying. So you have this hive of
I
professors.
need to lose some weight.
I've got fatty brain disease. So a bunch of fatheads and other people. But there's a lot of different perspectives, a lot of things to talk about. And so that's really the concept behind the podcast at this point. And, of course, this will start to get refined, I'm sure, as we go through this.
Refined like sugar.
Well, the old saying is that you got to burn a few steaks, and on the way to becoming the great steakhouse.
Yes.
And so, that said, does anybody have any parting remarks on what you'd like to see happen in a podcast like this?
Well, I want an explanation of what Scott is doing with his fingers.
Well, he's
Oh,
trying to
he's
signal me on the
I'm trying
time.
to tell Don that it's time.
But I see a big red light over
Yeah, we
there,
have a
man.
big red light up there, too.
So we got
Sometimes,
3
he
seconds.
forgets.
Take us out, Scott.
Hello.
And we're out.
That's not a good way to end it.
That was a
saying
terrible
hello.
way to end it.
Yeah.
All right.
On the contrary,
Oh, thank you.
it's a great way to end it.
And welcome back to the Professor's Audio Video Podcast. This is an opportunity to talk about different things happening here at our university, in our end of America, by golly, America. And also to, kind of talk to other folks in the profession and see what they're doing. So today, I'm Don Frazier. This is my colleague, Paul Fabrizio from the Political Science Department. I teach history. Scott Cloudis is our engineer and the guy that brings the common touch perspective to our show. But with us today is Dr. Stephen Harden. And Stephen Harden is also in the history department on history faculty here at McMurray University and is working on an interesting new project, a book entitled
Lust for Glory.
All right, Lust for. Where did we come up with this title?
We workshopped that title.
Really, and that's what you came up
My
with?
son and his wife and I, over the Christmas break, sat and I said, "Now let's just brainstorm. What would be?" Because I've written other books, and my friends have told me, "Well, Steve, that title was too obscure."
Well, like what, Texian Iliad?
More so Texian Macabre.
Really?
Which I think is a wonderful
It
title.
was a wonderful title.
Great
and a
book.
wonderful
Well, but
book.
what people tell me is I don't know what macabre means.
Well, that's on
Who
them.
cares?
Yeah.
Well,
I
I
mean,
do
it's-
because they're not buying that book and the numbers that I'd like. So,
So this
okay.
is Lust for Glory. Is it akin to like a bodice buster? Is
I
this
was
a romance?
just thinking the same thing. Is this a Harlequin romance?
if people think so, maybe they'll buy it. But no, it's not like
Wow.
that.
Oh, so it's not truth in advertising then.
So it's just
Well, no, it's no. I think there's a reason for that title because if we're talking about the what it is, this is an examination of a 25-year period in Texas history from 1821 to 1846. What I like to call the epic age, or the heroic age of Texas history. And that period includes Mexican independence in 1821, Anglo-American settlements, Stephen F. Austin, the deterioration of that relationship between the Anglo newcomers and the Mexican government, and the Texas Revolution, which incorporates the Come and Take It fight, the Alamo, Goliad, San Jacinto. Words or terms that used to be household words in Texas, not so much anymore. And I want to make
people are forgetting the Alamo?
I think people are forgetting the Alamo. In fact, I tell a story, and I'll tell it again.
Might as well.
Might as well, because a lot of people haven't heard it. Back in 2003, I was the historical advisor for a feature film called The Alamo, directed by John Lee Hancock. Some of you might remember it.
Billy Bob.
Billy Bob Thornton played Crockett, and
he still had a vial of Angelina's blood on him then, didn't he?
Not that I saw.
Ah,
That'd
have been cool.
I thought it was around his neck all the time.
I was
That's
around.
what I thought too.
Yeah.
Maybe he just never saw him without a shirt on.
Well,
I can guarantee you that.
Hashtag me too.
But after we made the movie, it came out on Easter weekend, 2004. And I thought it would be nice to take my mother and my Aunt Catha to just see this movie. So
That you were part of.
that I had worked on.
Yeah.
And so I went over to Aunt Catha's house to pick up Mom and Aunt Catha. While we were getting ready to go to the theater, my Aunt Catha's 19-year-old daughter breezed into the house. And she said, "Hi, Gran, what you doing?" And she said, "Well, we're going to see the movie that Stephen worked on." And she said, "What's it called?" And Aunt Catha said, "The Alamo." And it was a blank expression. And she said, "What's it about?" Now, when you teach
A little red tow truck named Mater.
well, when you teach history for a living, that's one of those moments that you want to go shower with a toaster. But
What an image.
but the thing about it is, this young lady at the time was attending a Texas junior college. She had attended Texas schools all of her life. If her grades are any indication, she's a good student. And what's probably more bewildering is she's a member of my family. So if she didn't know what the Alamo was about, I think it's a safe bet that a lot of kids nowadays don't, which probably explains why the movie bombed among the 17 to 25 demographic.
Ah, the golden demographic.
The golden demographic.
You needed to have some superheroes in it.
You needed to change the title to Lust for Glory.
Yeah, exactly.
So this book is about more than just the Alamo.
Oh yes, much more. But the Alamo, I explain in the introduction that this book is about the events that led up to the Alamo, and then what were the consequences of the Alamo. So the Alamo battle is kind of the pivotal incident of the book, and it's the springboard for the rest of it.
Now there's a subtitle.
Yes, it's an epic tale of the sacrifice that I forgot my own title. An epic tale of the sacrifice that defined a nation, and the nation I'm talking about is the Republic of Texas. We were a sovereign nation for 10 years. Between 1836 and 1846.
Were we very good at that?
No. And I
did anybody?
And I talk about it. Well, and Paul, this you can pipe in here because there is a movement in Texas, a Texas secession movement.
Yes.
And I think, so I see these secede bumper stickers on people's cars. And, I think maybe some of that's tongue-in-cheek. But then I meet people who are serious.
They really believe
They
it.
really believe
And they
that.
think Texas needs to secede from the Union.
Hang on, I got a caller.
Okay.
Somebody
Oh,
calling
my.
in to talk to.
First question of the day.
Hello, caller. You're on the Professor's podcast, and we're here with Professor Steve Harden talking about his book, Lusty Glory.
Lust for glory.
Oh, sorry,
Lust
Lust for
for
Glory.
Glory.
You have a question for Dr.
Lusty
Harden.
Glory was another book.
Hi, yes. I just wanted to say, well, first off, that I'm a huge fan. I listen all the time. This is my first call in.
First time caller, very nice. Glad you're here.
Long-time listener.
Yeah, long time listener, first time caller.
Well, first, Dr. Harden, your book, Texie and Iliad, absolutely saved my life. So thank you for that.
Well, how did it save your life?
Did it turn a bullet?
Yes, that's exactly what happened. No, I was reading it and just reading about the Texas history just inspired me a whole lot.
Oh,
so
well,
thank you.
thank you. Thank you.
Because I was never taught that in school.
Were you taught about the Alamo in school?
Yeah, just very briefly.
Were you? Did you go to school here in beautiful Texas?
Yes, I did. In Abilene, actually.
Ah, okay.
Did you get the Alamo in school here in Abilene, Scott?
Of course we got the Alamo.
I mean, but like how long? I mean, how much did you
Probably
talk?
not for that long. Seemed like to me that we covered the Tea Party a whole lot in history class for some reason. That's burned in
What,
my
the
mind.
Boston Tea Party
Yeah,
or
that
the
part of it.
modern day
Yeah.
Tea Party?
No, the Boston Tea
I
Party.
remember
Boston,
being up
yeah.
in Boston with him, and he was determined to go see where the Boston Tea Party took place.
Hey, if you're there, you got to go.
I kept
And,
telling him,
you
well,
know,
the problem is with all the backfill and stuff, it's actually 4 blocks from the water. But
Yeah,
anyhow.
have you been to the Alamo?
Yes, I have been to that.
Okay.
Sorry, caller, we're
More than
interrupting.
college.
Yeah.
That's all right.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Texie and Iliad because that book, while it is, I try to make my works of scholarship accessible to people who are not necessarily academics. That is something that my mentor, Grady McQuinney, stressed. And I think this is a problem with our profession is we've got people writing for about 12 other people in the profession.
As one person put it, we know more and more about less and less.
Well, that's exactly right. And we are marginalizing ourselves as a profession.
Yeah, because we've quit telling the story. The narrative.
Well, and we send a lot of students off to graduate schools. We do, well, here in history, we've got a nursing grad program, but
most of our kids graduate from here and go off someplace else.
That's
for
exactly
graduate
right.
school.
And
Sure.
we try to prepare them not only to get in these graduate schools, but to succeed in these graduate schools. And we sent a young man down to my alma mater, Texas State. And he was in a historiography class, and they were talking about professional writing.
Historiography is the history of history.
The history of history.
How do we know what we know and how do we know it?
Yeah.
Ooh, sounds philosophical.
Well, it can be, and perhaps should be.
History was a muse. Political science was not.
But he, we had always taught him to make his writing accessible.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he was talking to his prof down there. And he said, well, shouldn't we attempt to make our writing accessible? And his professor said, absolutely not. You're writing for other academics. And you could probably tell from the title that I'm not writing this book for other academics. I'm writing, probably more so than any book I've ever written, for the folks,
for the folks, like our caller. Caller, you still there?
Yeah.
Did
I'm still
you
here.
did you have a question for Professor Harden?
Oh, yes, I did. You were talking about the film The Alamo, and it was released Easter weekend 2004.
That's correct.
It just so happens that there was a film that came out Ash Wednesday 2004, The Passion of the Christ. Have you heard of that film?
Yes. Not only have I heard of that film, I've seen that film.
Isn't it just anyway?
And they re-released it Easter weekend, and a lot of people didn't go to see our movie because they went to see Mel Gibson's movie as a expression of faith.
Well, that's what my question was going towards. Do you think because your film was released, just, I don't know, a couple weeks to a month after The Passion, do you think that hurts the ticket sales?
I do think it hurt the ticket sales, but listen, we it wasn't just that movie we lost to. Opening weekend we made $9 million, and that may seem like a lot of money, but when you consider that we spent about $130 million.
And was your share of this a substantial amount?
No.
Oh.
Although, my check's cashed, so I have no reason to complain.
I blame it on John Wayne.
Thanks for calling. Caller.
I agree.
Yeah, thank you for taking my call.
Okay.
That's interesting. So I continue on with your book. So, where can we get this book? How long is this book?
Well, it hasn't been published yet. We anticipate that I'm publishing it with a local firm, State House Press. And not a footnote one in this book, on purpose.
And what is that purpose?
Well, and Scott, I hope you don't find this condescending. I'm writing this book for you. I'm not writing this book for Don or Paul. I'm writing this book for you.
So we don't have to read it, but you do now.
That's just.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying, Stephen. Thank you for doing that. Where you're telling more of the story than just trying to do a scholarly work.
Well, and listen, I'm not making this up. I was at the Texas State Historical Association a few years back, and a total stranger came up and shook my hand, and he said, "Dr. Harden, thank you for writing books I can understand." And I said, well, yeah, I think I have a duty to do that. But what that made me realize that most of my colleagues aren't.
Yeah, they're just not.
And
I really don't like reading a lot of history.
I don't either.
Which is odd for a historian. Just because I can't wade through some of it.
Mr. Too Many Words guy.
Too many words. I can't read this.
The same thing in political science, too.
But Scott, you mentioned too many words. Purposely, the chapters in this book are short. And so if you don't want to spend an entire evening, you can read a chapter or two, and because the chapters are short, you can get to the meat of the story immediately. And it's not the definitive work, but if you have an interest in this period of Texas history, it is a quick and dirty introduction. And after you've read my book, Small on Purpose, you'll know a lot more than you did. And you won't want to kill yourself after you read it.
Yeah, we thank you for that, Stephen. We do. I appreciate that. The point that you're making there, the way that you came at this book, I really do. And I think it's going to do well for you.
Well, I hope so, because I firmly believe, and I'm a little bit evangelical about this, that
preach it.
Yeah, preach it, sister.
Preach it.
That there used to be an audience for books. When I was a kid growing up, I read books by Walter Lord or Bruce Catton.
Sure.
Marvelous writers. Barbara Tuchman was another.
Journalist.
Now, what does that tell you, Don?
Yeah, look, first seminar I was in graduate school at TCU, I'm sitting there and being asked, who is your favorite historian?
Yeah.
And I said, well, Barbara Tuchman. And everybody, well, who's this new guy? He doesn't know anything.
Yes.
And I was chided by the professor, and you know who he was.
Yes.
And he goes, well, Barbara Tuchman was a journalist, not a historian. I said, but Barbara Tuchman sold 60 million copies.
Right.
And all of a sudden people knew stuff because of what she wrote.
Exactly.
And
at what point did historians stop trying to, because there was a time when people would go to work, come home after a hard day, and read history books.
Yeah. Because they were inspirational.
Well, Parkman
and all of a sudden you read this book and you felt good about your country. You felt good about humanity.
Yes.
You felt something.
Yeah. And while
No.
mine
I
is
never
not
came home and read a history book after work, but it's okay. Go ahead, I'm listening. Yeah.
well, and
You don't have patches on your jacket. If you had patches on your elbow, you'd read history books when you came home from work. After
That
you
means-
smoked a bowl of it.
That means you'd be a professor too. Yeah,
but well, why, Scott?
Yeah, why didn't you?
Why didn't you come home and read
Too many
history?
books on elk hunting.
Exactly. Yeah, and that was my deal. I read more article stuff than I do full-length books, and that's it's always been more interesting to me. And I have to be interested to even in my subject to even read those. So
Okay, Scott.
Yeah.
Now you're onto something, or I think maybe I'm onto something, because the chapters in this book are article length.
right.
So a person can come in, and if they don't have a lot of time, and I realize that everyone doesn't have a lot of time these days. So you could come in and read this short chapter, and maybe at bedtime, or
Sure.
But I'm not saying it's not going to require a real commitment of your time to get through this book.
Can I read it on my phone?
That's a good question. I'll have to talk to my publisher.
That would, this would lend itself to that.
It really would.
Not at
I
this
hadn't
point.
really. That's a good question, Paul. I hadn't.
I mean, as I look at what our students read and how they read, my most effective way to get them to read is send them something that they read on their phone.
Oh, that's a good point.
Huh.
All right, well, we're
We're
ready to wind this up, but we should look for this book in about.
My publisher tells me that it will come out in November of 2018, right before Christmas.
Right.
That's
Suitable
on
for gift giving.
That's on purpose, and that's right. It would be a wonderful gift for an uncle or a grandfather or someone who is interested in this period of Texas history, but is not interested in reading an academic treatise. This really is written for the non-academic audience on purpose.
So we need to really focus on the 17 to 30 age that y'all called the golden age, because they're the ones that don't know who the Alamo is. So
Well, this would
We'll
be
deal with their grandparents first, and
Oh,
hopefully
and then
it'll trickle down.
Oh, okay.
well,
Trickle down
this
message.
would
Okay.
It's
this
the
would
Reagan
be
thing.
a good introduction for a young person who maybe doesn't know about as much as one should about this. It's a painless way to get in, and then after you have that informational foundation, you might want to read some of my other books that are.
And I just figured out the purpose of this podcast: to plan your Christmas wish list.
Absolutely. Well,
Yes.
in this episode, the wish list is Lust for Glory,
Yes.
and it's a history of the Texas Revolution
And Republic.
All right, and we're out.